Good morning, friends. Today we are going to discuss about satire in Gulliver's Travels. With me in the studio, we have Dr. Beena Mahida. She is the principal of Anand Arts College. She is also the syndicate member as well as the chairman of Board of Studies. This is Dr. Himanshu Srivastav. Let us first discuss the general characteristics about the Augustan age, which is very important for us to study. What we will be doing is we'll be studying the literary tendencies, and then we'll be switching over to the satire as an element, and then later on we'll be looking about the political scenario of the age in which Gulliver's Travels was written, and then why Gulliver's Travels is a satire. So I'll just request my slides to be shown. 18th century in England is known as Augustan age. It is also known as the age of Pope, Neoclassical age, or the age of Queen Anne. The reign of Augustus Caesar is known as the golden age in the Roman history, and that is why it is known as the Augustan age from the name of the king Augustus. It witnessed in all around development in art and literature, trade and commerce. The phrase Augustan we have already discussed. In both the ages, critical spirit prevailed. The literature produced by artificial society, it was not a literature of creative effort, but of self-conscious and deliberate. It is also known as the age of prose, the age of reason and good sense, the age of set rules and regulations, and finally the point we are going to discuss today is the age of satire. Certain great writers who contributed during this age were Joseph Addison and Steele, Swift that we are going to discuss today, Samuel Richardson, Fielding, the Four Wills and all, Goldsmith, Dr. Johnson, Pope. Now let us first primarily switch over to what exactly do we mean by satire. Satire, as it is shown on your screen, is primarily a literary genre form. In satire, vices, follies, abuses and shortcomings are held up to ridicule, ideally with the intent of shaming individual and society itself into improvement. That is the main important thing, to improve the society. What are the elements of satire? Must attack an institution. It may be government, it may be politics, religion, education, or so on. It must be humorous. That is the major element. Most of us might convince with a photograph that has been shown on the right hand side. Must use responsibility. In other words, can not outwardly mock anything that could damage the writer's reputation. That is what I said. It should have a message. It must be clear. The target should be very much clear. Formal language, and it should become like a private joke. It involves sophistication and everyone may not get it. So, there are certain things that we should observe before we write a satire, before we try to tag a literary text as satire. These were the originators of satire, the form: Juvenal, Horace and Persius. It was developed by Juvenal, Horace and Persius in Rome, and they gave satire its great life force. English satirists were highly influenced by these three people. Now let us first try to know that what is the difference between these three. The Juvenal satirists were vigorous, venomous and caustic, while Horatian satirists were milder. They were gentler in their tendencies. We are going to switch over to the revolution that was very important for the study of Gulliver's Travels as satire, and for that let me ask with me in the studio Dr. Beena. She will be taking over the charge of the mic and will be trying to explain you the political background and why Gulliver's Travels is known as satire? Madam.
Thank you, sir. He has already discussed the characteristics of neoclassical era, the satire, how it was originated. And before discussing Gulliver's Travels as a satire, it is essential for any student to become familiar with Glorious Revolution, which occurred in the year 1688. Actually saying, we can say that the neoclassical era, the neoclassical age or the age of Pope begins with Glorious Revolution and it ends with the death of Jonathan Swift and Mr. Alexander Pope in 1745. Slide please. The Glorious Revolution which occurred in 1688. During that year, James II was a great despot. He was Roman Catholic. The students, they must be familiar with the two branches of Christianity. One is known as Roman Catholic, the second one is Protestant. And in the 16th century, King Henry VIII, he broke from papacy and he established the Church of England, and therefore most of the people in England, they are the followers of not Roman Catholicism, but they are Protestant. But here in 1688, James II, he was a Roman Catholic, and therefore most of the people or the people in Britain, they believe that if this man, if this king, he will rule for a long time, then once again Roman Catholicism will be restored. Once again Pope will dominate the affairs of England, and therefore they were against this James II. And in 1688, slide please, in 1688 he was forced to leave the throne, and his son-in-law William of Orange, he was made the king. William of Orange, his son-in-law, he was a Protestant and he agreed to rule according to the wishes of the people. So naturally, gradually, we can say that power from the king now passed to parliament. A day arrived when now king is not the dominant personality in England, but whosoever wins in the election becomes the powerful person, and therefore in 18th century we have the emergence of two main political parties in England. One is Tory party and the second one is Whig party. Next. Tory party stands for king, or you can say that it stands for the Church of England. Whig party, it stands for the new merchants and lawyers. It also includes Puritans. Next. The 18th century witnessed politics and literature. Both the things, it became closely connected. Addison and Steele, the essayists, they were given high positions in the state by the Whig party since they were favoring Whig party. The writer of Gulliver's Travels, Swift, he became the chief spokesperson and propagandist of Tory party, and therefore so many critics, they believe that the literary talents of these writers wasted since they were doing their works for political parties. And we are really very much grateful that when Tory party was not in a power, Swift was able to write Gulliver's Travels, and when Whig party was not in power, this Steele and Addison, they were able to give us immortal essays. Next. Now, coming back to our topic, Swift's Gulliver's Travels or satire in Gulliver's Travels. This is just in a brief the life sketch of Swift. Mr. Swift was a posthumous child. He was born in Dublin at Ireland. He was unable to get the love of his father and mother. He was brought up by his uncle, Mr. William Temple. He attended Trinity College, and then after he adopted the profession called clergyman, he became clergyman. And then after he was in a love with one girl whose name was Verena, but he received disillusionment in love, and he made two resolutions of his life: never never to like any children, and it's a really very much ironical that his Gulliver's Travels, it was a very much popular and still it is very much popular among children. And the second resolution of his life was never to get married. Slide please. Since he was favoring Tory party and he was the spokesperson of Tory party, so these are the political beliefs of Mr. Swift. Next, Swift in the history of English literature is known as a misanthrope because he was a hater of mankind. The kind of experiences that he has in his life, the kind of experiences that he has received in his professional life, we can say that he made him misanthrope. And in order to show that why we can call him misanthrope, the first quotation I have given here, he wrote one day to Pope that I have ever hated all nations, professions and communities, but principally I hate and detest that animal called man. Not only he is a misanthrope, but in the history of English literature he is known as a satirist also. And in order to show that how poignantly he was writing or he is satirizing the mankind as well as the English people, in Gulliver's Travels in book number 2, we have this very famous satirical comment by Mr. Swift. The king describes the mankind like this: the most pernicious race of little odious vermin that nature ever suffered to crawl upon the surface of the earth. So, the history of English literature remembers Mr. Jonathan Swift as a misanthrope as well as a satirist. Next. Now, if we look at the life experiences, why he has turned as a satirist, why such kind of hatred for the mankind, then during his tenure as a spokesperson of Tory party, he worked a lot for the Tory government, and naturally he expected a reward for his labor in the form of high church appointment since he was a clergyman. He expected that he will be made, he is a qualified person to become the bishop of the Church of England. But he was ignored and he was made the dean of St. Patrick Church at Ireland. And this particular turning point of his life made him the misanthrope as well as a satirist. And with this particular appointment as a dean, his interest in British politics ended. And then after he spent his whole life at Ireland. Next please. Now exactly which inspired, what was the reason that he wrote this Gulliver's Travels? Now during his stay at London, he had seen the worst of human nature. Since he was attached with the politicians, the courtiers and the kings, and the period that he has spent in London, 1710 to 1713, he has seen the vain pride and the absurd whims of the courtiers. He has seen the stupidity of men. He has seen the stupidity of the monarchs. He has seen the intrigues of the courtiers and the greed of the politicians. He has seen the false glory of the conqueror. And he has seen the treachery of the court. When he was in Ireland, as a dean at St. Patrick Church, he found the Irish people, they are very much poor. They are exploited by the Britishers. Not only that, but the Irish people, they don't know anything regarding their rights. He was a clergyman and his main business is to provide spiritual food. But such kind of corruption in the society, the corruption as well as the vices of the mankind inspire him what to do. He wants to do something for the society. And therefore he decided to create an imaginary world in which he can expose the vices of the mankind. And with this idea, he has created this Gulliver's Travels. Not only this reason, but in 1719, Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe became very much popular. And Swift was a member of a Scribblers Club. And during that time, he has already noted down some of the incidents in his diary, and with this background he decided to create one imaginary world, and he wrote Gulliver's Travels. Now let us come to the book. Gulliver's Travels, it is in a 4 parts. When he wrote this book, it bears a very long title. The original title of the book was Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World, in 4 parts by Lemuel Gulliver, first a surgeon and then a captain of several ships. But nowadays the novel is known as Gulliver's Travels only, because the title is very much lengthy one. The book is in a 4 parts. These are some of the photographs from from 4 books. The first book of Gulliver's Travels takes us in the world of Lilliput, or you can say that Lilliputian world is described. In the second book, we are taken in the land of Brobdingnag. The third book, we are taken in a flying island called Laputa. And in the fourth book, we are taken in the world of horses, who are known as Honihims, or you can say that another creatures are also presented and they are known as Yahoos. Next please. Now no doubt the book is totally full of imagination. It's imaginary world, but in order to show realities and in order to make the book very much plausible, certain means are adopted by Swift. Gulliver's Travels begins with 2 letters. Gulliver, the whole name is Lemuel Gulliver. Gulliver in the very beginning gives us 1 letter. He is the narrator, and therefore we have Captain Gulliver's letter to his cousin and friend Mr. Simpson, in which Gulliver makes some accusations that Mr. Simpson has deleted certain important passages from his diary. It was Mr. Simpson who pressed him to publish this account. It was in his diary, and Gulliver asked Mr.